episode of The Clackbox. I'm Cody Kleckler, your host, and it is really late on a Tuesday evening. I'm recording this, and I felt motivated to record this because today there was a lot of conversation at work, which happens often, and even in some other circles, and even at home today, there was a lot of conversation about this topic. And so I'm excited to kind of talk about it. Don't have a guest. The guest is me. But if you would like to engage in this conversation, I'd love to hear from you. So please, whether it be on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, however you are listening to this podcast, Podbean, leave a comment, ask questions, because again, the idea of this podcast is to be a conversation, not necessarily be a dialogue of just me rambling, or a monologue. It's meant to be a dialogue. So please subscribe, share, put this out there. Help me get this podcast out so other people can listen to it, because it is my labor of love and I want to learn. And the best way I learn is by talking to other people, by hearing what they're saying and through their experiences and their eyes. And so please get that word out so I can learn, and then hopefully we all learn together. But tonight, actually, the topic that we have is talking about leadership. And so we listened to or watched a video today on how to develop leaders and a couple of key identifiers to developing leaders. It was really, really good. And I'll probably talk more about that a little bit later. But then when I got home, my wife posted on Facebook, what is the most important attribute of a leader? And she asked me, and I had a really hard time wrapping my head around what one was. She posted on social media, got a lot of good feedback from that. And there's a lot of mixed reviews on this, which I thought was interesting. A lot of people having different opinions and different thoughts. And I know that a lot of that comes from the experience that they're in right now, whether it be, they're happy with their job, not happy with their job, they have a good leader, don't have a good leader, maybe they're under a micromanager, and that is what comes into play with their answer for this. And maybe for some of it doesn't. Maybe they just have a collective experience, and this is what they believe is, and what the number one thing is. So we did see trust, we saw humility. A couple of people put a sense of humor, which I thought was awesome. There was a lot of different answers: servant, leader, put others first, someone who's willing to get their hands dirty, work alongside me, someone who's willing to do what they ask of the people that they're leading. And so there's just a lot of really, really good answers. So again, I would love to have your answers on that. But here's my long-winded answer. Because there's a couple of factors that come into this. One is experience. What have your experiences been? Have you had a good leader? Have you had a bad leader over you? Have you followed someone you wish you didn't? Do you reminisce on a great leader that you did follow that you wish you were still following? There's a lot of factors to this topic, and I think that's what's difficult. And even as I was getting ready to record this, the thought was, are all of us called to be leaders? Well, I don't know. I think so, because I think all of us are leading something. I think whether it be our home, as a husband or a wife, you're leading. If you're a parent, you're leading. If you're a spouse, there's elements of leading. Yeah, if you have a job at all, you're leading. Teacher, education, you're leading something, right? You're leading something in someone on some point. And even, there's a lot. I think all of us are leading something. And so I think there's a really good thoughts to have about what we're leading and who we're leading. I think what's the quote that I've heard that how do you tell if you're leading if you look behind you and someone's following, or the reverse, how do you tell if you're not leading because no one's following you? But I think you're leading something, even if it's by example. You are leading, and I think that's why Christ talks as a Christian is very similar to as a leader. that we're supposed to serve. And I think it's why servant leadership is so big. And I know that there's other people that talk about this that are way smarter than I am. And I read their books and think they're brilliant and don't have all this figured out. And so I'm just talking. And so I think I had a hard time wrapping my head around one thing. As we were Alice and I were talking about these topics or these attributes, and which one was the greatest, and which one do you think you're working, do you need to work on the most right now? And I struggled with not the one I need to work on the most, because there's a lot of them, but the one that I need to work on the most right now. And I also think this is the biggest area that God is stretching me in my leadership capacity, in my ministry, and what he has for me is he's trying to grow me a lot in this area and kind of unfold more of who he's called and created me to be. So for me, what I would wrap it all up into is probably the term others first. Whether it be, and maybe you would say humility. And okay, that's fine. I'm cool with that classification. I'm going to use others first because I feel like it wraps more around it than just humility. But so why do I say others first? Well, because as a Christian, as someone who follows Jesus, I'm supposed to love God and then love others as I love myself, and consider other people before myself. And so that is others first. Just as a person, I'm supposed to consider that. If I model servant leadership, it's others before me. It's God before me and others before me. So others first. If I am equipping someone and discipling, equipping, and empowering them, then I'm thinking about them and who God has called them to be, not who I want them to be, or who I want them just to fill the role that I have. Or even that I have this role in my ministry that I don't want to do this, or I'm not very good at this, or it's just a pain, so let me just find a body to throw in there. Well, that's me first, not others first. And of course that spirals into the idea that's why we use people versus empowering people, use people versus equipping. And I think when we have a culture of using people in our ministry, we burn through them. Because we can use them and appreciate them, that doesn't mean we're empowering them, and they pick up on that a little bit. It becomes a grind, and they would opt for, I'll stop serving so I continue to like to go to church, versus continue to hate going to church. And I think that's why some people kind of go, well, I've given them, they have this role, and I appreciate them. We had a volunteer appreciation. I don't understand why we have a hard time keeping leaders. And I think it's because you're not empowering them. And I'm thinking about myself first. How can they make my job easier? And the truth is, leaders and developing leaders and having people serve in your ministry doesn't make my job easier at all. At all. I've said this before about interns or having another employee. It doesn't make my job easier. It means it makes my job harder, or at least keeps it the same. Because now I've got to think about the leader first, how I'm developing them, how I'm growing them. And that is wrapped up in who God's created them to be. That's wrapped up in what God has for them in the future, not what I want them to be to make my job easier. And I think that's part of it too. Leaders aren't there to make my job easier. Leaders are there for us to be able to expand what we're doing, reach more people for the lost, or reach more lost people for the kingdom, and love on people better. And that rarely makes my job easier, right? And sometimes it means I actually do different things that maybe I don't want to do. Maybe empowering the leaders that God has given around me means that they get to do things that I used to like to do, and now I have to do things I don't want to do. But that's what's better for the ministry. And so, for example, for this is there's been times in my ministry where a leader will show up and they know what's expected of them. They know that I want them to greet and smile to every kid, and if they have a specific role, hey, you're working the cafe tonight, you're helping serve dinner tonight, whatever it is, you're hosting tonight or whatever, and then just make your rounds, make every kid feel special, before service and as we're getting, but they'll show up and go, hey, what can I do? Hey, do you need me to help set up chairs, or do you know help do this? And a lot of times, like, we would say, like, oh yeah, totally, like, yeah, come help me set up chairs because it's going to take forever, or I don't want to do it, or hey, can you help me set up for this game? And I don't do that. I'll say, no, you go hang out with students, I got this. And it's not because I don't like students. I love hanging out with students, but I understand I can go help set up the game or set up the chairs or whatever it is. You go hang out with students, because if I have all of you hanging out with students, that's what you're here for. You are here for that role, not checking a task off my list. Now, there are times where I'm like, yes, I need help with this or whatever, but for the most part, how am I equipping you to do ministry? And it's just even in little things like that, where I'd rather hang out with students and not go straighten chairs, or not go, tape down a tarp or whatever. I want to go beat a kid at Fortnite or something, or, destroy them at foosball. And so for me, it's what God wants for them before what I want for them. In that, I think that's vitally important. I think their family comes before my ministry role for them every time. So it's others first. See, I tell leaders all the time, I have a leader that I've told, no, you cannot serve. For about 2 years, told them no, because they had like 1,700 kids under the age of 4. No, they had like 3 or 4 kids under the age of 6. And I'm like, dude, you need to focus on your family. This is family time. And because their family comes first before me or what I need in our ministry. Because I can't say get your priorities straight and then ask them serving in my ministry to trump his first call of ministry, which is his home. I can't do that. That would be hypocritical. So I think others first in that. There's a lot of ways that others first comes into play with this. How am I appreciating them? What is their love language? Like, it's really good for me to know my leader's love language. Others first. Am I nurturing them? Am I appreciating them in their love language? Do they know that I care about them as people more than I care about them as a volunteer? I think that's huge. I think that's actually probably the biggest thing, and not through flattery. We know flattery is a sin, actually. If you didn't know that, it is. And so, not because I'm flattering them so much that they're loyal to me. And see, I think that's the thing, is that they need to be loyal to the body, and a local body, that local specific church, or that local business, whatever that arena is. They need to be loyal to the vision of it, not to the person of it. Allison and I, in our ministry, we have gone to places and we've left places and we've had times of transition, and I find it very comforting that not a lot of people have left. I don't think anybody has left a church when we left. And that is not the thing to say about us leaving negatively. I think it has to do with, like, you should be loyal to this organization or this church or this ministry over me. I'm not in the business of creating followers. I'm in the business of creating leaders, right? Like, I'm called to make leaders, not called to make followers of Cody. So others first. Putting other people, submitting to the authority of the vision, and putting that in front of my own, so that the people that I'm developing, or the leaders that I'm developing, it's not about me. I'm not developing them to follow me. I'm developing them to lead. It's developing leaders. And I think that's developing leaders is what a leader does. I just think that's what leaders do, is they develop leaders and they empower them. And so you're thinking about others first. How else? Oh, this was a big one. I heard this on a podcast and I just thought it was great. I wish I could take credit for it, but I can't. But I heard it and it will stick with me for a long time. This others first. The others first thing is me, but I think this is another example of it. It was said on the Controlled Chaos podcast, which is an amazing podcast for junior high ministry, middle school ministry. It's just a great podcast. Justin does a great job with it. I think they're actually hitting his 50th episode tomorrow, which is really, really cool. Congrats to you, Justin. The Controlled Chaos podcast, which is sponsored by CIY, Crescent Youth. Amazing ministry. Love you, CIY. But he had a guest, Ellie, who's a part of Stuff You Can Use ministry and stuffyoucanuse.org, and we've used a lot of their stuff. It's amazing curriculum and event planning and calendar planning and stuff. So check them out. Ellie from Stuff You Can Use, but she said, I can tell I'm doing a good job developing leaders if it hurts my ego. Again, she said, I can tell I'm doing a good job developing leaders if it hurts my ego. And I think that's so true. And I would even add, because they start getting credit that I used to get. So, for example, one of the things for me to broaden, I feel God's calling us to do in our student ministry is develop a teaching team and a leadership pipeline and all these things. And if you want information on us developing a leadership pipeline, hey, hit me up in the comments. I think a leadership pipeline works for any profit, non-for-profit, and multi-organizational thing. Heck, I've even wondered why, like, a soccer association isn't looking at coaches and trying to develop a leadership pipeline a little bit in that. Student ministry, I think, is a little bit different than anything else, because we are in the process of developing a leadership pipeline for students and a leadership pipeline for our adults. And some of the adult stuff lives in the greater scheme of the church's leadership pipeline, which is great. And I love that, like working in unison with that. But we have the one for students too, so we kind of have these dual things. But anyways, in that, we have two amazing leaders, Chris and Nathaniel. I think Nathaniel's been on a couple of episodes of this of the Clackbox with me. But trying to see who God's created them to be and empower them and equip them. One of the things is this teaching team, and they both, I believe, have a good gift for teaching. Chris lives a little bit more in the coaching side, and Nathaniel's lives a little bit more in the lecture side, where I live a little bit more in the preaching side. And so it's great to have all three of us. Well, in that, a part of the pipeline, and then moving them through that pipeline and the stage they're at, being able to speak. And if you have no idea what a leadership pipeline is, hit me up too. I can show you what that is, and what it kind of look like, the basis of it, of what it looks like. But part of that is for them is speaking and the level that they're at with the competencies they've reached, and seeing that, well, I like speaking. I like preaching. It's kind of like the game. All of us like to play in the game. None of us really like to practice. And so I see that, and I'm letting go of something that I like to do because it's others first. And again, like I said, you can kind of wrap these all up in humility, and so maybe I'm just doing a different word because it makes better sense in my mind. But it's them. And it's not even them, like, okay, I'll let them speak, but they kind of have to do what I do, or I'm so worried that they're going to do a bad job. Because one of the things that was said on the response was the willingness to let the people that they're leading fail. And I'm like, it's so good, because I think I'm struggling with that a little bit. And I think I'm doing a good job right now, but that's something that I have struggled with. But letting a leader, spending time and a little bit of training and a little bit of developing, and then saying, hey, go, figure it out. Yeah, and your first time speaking is probably not going to be a home run. It might be. Usually the first time is, it's the second time. You're like, but it's okay. What if the kids don't like it? I don't care. If God's called him to it, he's got a gift for it, it'll be fine. What if it's not like you? Well, that's fine too, because it's about who God made him. Well, what if he's not as funny as you, Cody, because you're hilarious? That's okay. God has brought him here for a reason. It's to use this. It's not about me. It's about them and God. And so I think even in that, well, then you go to the ego side. Well, the ego side is, and him getting praise. Man, what if he does a great job and like all the leaders are just like, man, Chris did an amazing job, and they're so used to you speaking, they hardly ever tell you did a good job, if ever. Hint, leaders. No, just kidding. But what if a parent hears it, it's like, man, that he killed it. That was amazing. That parent doesn't even like me, or whatever. No, it can affect our ego big time. That's how I know I'm doing a good job. I'm doing a good job because it puts my ego at risk, because they're going to be getting praise that I used to get. And so again, it's others first. And so there's still more ways that are wrapped up in that, right? Yeah, for me, one of the things that I have to think about is, as leading a student ministry, if I lead a student ministry that I like, it's not a student ministry, it's a ministry for 38-year-olds. Right? If I'm like, oh, I like this music and this and this and this, I have to be careful. Now, I can like some of the things that they like, for sure, totally. But I have to be conscious of that I'm not leading a ministry that me and my leaders like, that I'm leading a ministry that the students like. And so it's putting them first. It's other first in my leading, in my leadership. I actually had a conversation with a youth pastor about this, where they kept doing events, and particularly one in particular that students were just, they would have a few students show up. They just felt like this was supposed to be a big invite thing, and people aren't big in inviting and whatever. And I'm like, well, do you like doing that? I'm like, yeah, I love it. Well, do you think students like doing that? Well, I don't know. Okay, well, that has to come into play, because if they don't like it, they're not going to come. I mean, I don't think they weren't doing a knitting thing, but a knitting, they have a knitting outing. Let's knit, it's probably not something a 15, 16-year-old wants to do. And so we have to think about those things in our leadership. It's others first. Even leadership, learning styles. Learning styles is a big deal, or who we learn from. So if I'm leading people, I can't expect them to learn the way that I do every time. They're going to have different learning styles, completely different learning styles. And so I need to think through what's their learning style and try to help engage them, train them, educate them through their learning style, not through mine. Right? Because I've done that where I'm like, dude, you have to watch this. Let's watch this 30-minute video. It's amazing. This guy talking about this was so good. And we'll get 5 minutes into it. I'm like, so don't you think it's good? And they're like, meh. Or they're like, man, I can't watch any more of this. That mannerism is driving me insane. Like, if I just would have heard this on a podcast versus watching it, it'd be so much better. I'm like, what do you mean? That doesn't get on my nerves. And it gets on their nerves. And so, again, it's another way of us having to think in our leadership, others first. Even in leadership of knowing when to step down or when to walk away, you're thinking about them first. Others first. And so, and I think Jesus even did that for us, where he did wash the disciples' feet, where he did think about God and others first constantly. But he even said that in this really strange little verse that I never really thought about it in this way, because it was always really strange for me. But in John 14, chapter 14, verse 12, Jesus says, very truly I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I've been doing. But then he says this, and they will do even greater things than these, because I'm going to the Father. And so it's like, Jesus says, see all these things I've been doing, you're going to do those things too, and you're going to even do greater things. And I'm thinking, what do you mean now I'm even going to do greater things? How is that even possible? Right? You're driving in your car right now, listening to this, and Jesus looks at you and tells you, yeah, I did great things, but you're going to even do greater. And you're like, no way. Because you can't even drive, hold on to that burger, and answer a text at the same time, right? Like, so how am I gonna walk on water if I can't even do that? Jesus, come on. I mean, you just dropped the Chick-fil-A waffle fry in between the seat and the center console, and you can't find it. And it's gonna smell in there for the next week, right? Like, we can't even do that. What do you mean we're gonna do greater things than you did? Because Jesus was like, I'm gonna empower you. I'm going to empower you too. And I'm totally cool with it because it's others first. And so I think no matter what we think of in leadership, whether it be if we're trustworthy or if we trust, if we're humble, if we serve, if we're willing to get our hands dirty, if we're willing to do what we've asked people to do. Because I want to say this. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. And I think it's true with parenting, and I think it's true with leadership. You will never take someone to where you're not willing to go and you haven't been. And you see this a lot in worship, especially, where you're like, I want people to worship intently, but none of your leaders are worshiping. I want our church, our congregation to worship and to have a culture of worship. But you go talk out in the atrium as the pastor or the pastors, or you're not, like, you don't worship with them, you're not going to get that. And that's just my opinion. Sorry, it's a clackbox opinion, but I see that. And so I don't think we can take people to where we're not willing to go or we haven't been ourselves. And that's, again, I think that's good leadership. And so getting your hands dirty, working alongside them, developing them in the way God's created them to be, not what I want them to be, and all of these things, how I honor their family, how I honor their time, how do I respect their time, all of these things, I'm thinking about them first. My prayer life, does my prayer life resemble that? It should, right? Am I praying for my leaders and their families just as much as I am mine? Because they got skin in the game too. They're subject to just as much spiritual warfare as I am. Because they're in it. They're serving in this thing with me. And they're in the mud and in the mess. And just because my name has pastor in front of it doesn't mean, I don't think it means I'm getting attacked more. And so how am I praying for them? How am I equipping them? Am I just telling them, or am I showing them? Right? So all those things I think just get wrapped up and do others first. And so I'm not trying to make a big umbrella word that everything fits under so I sound smarter, but I think really in everything I do, how am I encouraging leaders? How am I equipping them? All those things. If I think about others first, if I think about them first, those other things will flow. That's just my opinion on it. And so let me know what you guys think. I'm really intrigued to know what the dialogue out there in the real world or whatever is. I'd love to hear from you on this, and then what you think the most important thing is, and then even throw out there what you think you feel like the thing is that the number one thing you need to work on the most is. Because I think that helps us. That helps us all if you weren't willing to be that transparent with it. I shared mine, and so I'd love to hear yours. And let me see if there's a pattern. If we're all kind of working on the same thing, I think it'd be a great topic to bring someone who's way cooler and smarter than we are onto this. And again, just let me hear from you. I'd love to hear from you. And so thanks for listening to this episode of The Clackbox. Again, subscribe, push it forward. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear back from you. Y'all have a great